Welcome to Legacy Unscripted, the podcast where sports and business collide. I'm your host, Russ Katzman, and here we'll skip the fluff and get straight to the hustle. From athletes turned entrepreneurs to impact-driven business leaders, we'll dive into the wins, the lessons, and the failures that make your legacy worth living. In this episode, we welcome Dr. Aaron Studwell of XO Consulting. Aaron, good to see you.
Good to be here. It's really glad we've had the opportunity to do this. I know we've known each other probably feels like longer than a year, but I think it's probably been close to that. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah, it's been a year or two. You've had a ton of stuff going on. So why don't you just give the listeners a little tidbit of why you're here and what is XO Consulting and what's it made of?
A little background on myself, a PhD in atmospheric science, but I've been around the sports management field since the mid to late 80s. So I kind of date myself with that statement. Jim Harbaugh and I were teammates at Michigan football. I worked for Bo Schembechler and Lloyd Carr, two college Hall of Fame coaches there. Continued to grow when I was at General Motors, getting involved in racing. That continued. Went and did a master's at Texas A&M. Meteorology, wound up starting Race Weather in 2003, and that was really the first company I launched as an entrepreneur. It was started as a hobby site, but actually just today, when we're recording this, we launched a brand new site. We have companies coming to us to work with us because of our high SEO rankings, and we're well known in the industry, media teams, drivers, fans. That's who we do this for, and through those connections, we actually got into sports management through racing in 2020. Happy pandemic. Finished my PhD earlier that year. And with the pandemic, nobody was hiring. So I started to start my own business. That was XO Consulting. And that's grown. We have three brands. The Race Weather brand, which I mentioned. We have Chesapeake Analytics, which is on the weather side. And then EC Sports Management is our sports brand. We now represent, once I sign a contract later today, 18 drivers and teams across 6 major race series in North America and Europe. And we do sponsorship development. We do assist in the marketing. We promote the drivers. We help with activation at track, and we manage their sponsors and clients.
That's terrific. I mean, it's every young boy's dream to go to the University of Michigan, unless you're like myself that grew up in Wisconsin. And mid-'80s football was not something we would talk about. But no, every one of us wanted to grow up and kind of, be involved in the sports world, some aspect of it. If we weren't playing, how could we stay connected? Well, maybe I'll be an agent. That's quite the evolution for you from, weather on into being a sports agent. Talk to me about some of the similarities that you found that made it a transition for you.
Well, what really helped with the transition was the personal brand. It's building a trust and really having a communication style, which I'm not going to go scream something from the rooftops. If something's bad's happening, you want a cool, calm, calculated message that is accessible to everybody. So when they saw that communication skill, the networking skills by, working through the communities, I started working with a driver, Landon Castle, in summer of 2020 to help him with a project. And we were both like, hey, we like working together. Come on board. I'll hire you, retainer, commissions. And we started with that. And he was our only client for maybe like 6 months. And then word kind of got out. Never really promoted ourselves with, hey, we're looking for clients. Never had to. It's been people coming to us and saying, hey, we heard from Chad McCumbee, or we heard from somebody else, a team owner or another driver in the series that you're working with them and you've got them to sponsor. We want to work with you. And then you kind of go through the process. Is this somebody I want to work with? We have mostly referral based now. Late last year, we signed a 16-year-old driver from the UK. If you go back to the movie, I believe it was Gran Turismo, where the kid drove on video games and then had a chance to drive in real life.
Yep.
He did that, won the series, won his age group, and he was thinking about racing Porsches in the UK. Jude Peters is his name. This season is opting to drive in the European Le Mans Series, and we're looking for sponsorship for
Wow.
him there. So it's really networking and connections and having a communication style which draws people in and they want to hear your message. And we've done everything from, we're hopefully going to close a deal soon on with a 501c3 foundation, to where that we have an arrangement like American Legion has with Chip Ganassi Racing, to pure sponsorships, whether that's an activation, whether that's podcasts or software platforms or crypto or however you want to, whatever they want, and whoever wants to be in the series. We do have one on the table that hopefully will come out positively in a week. We were talking before we hit record, so I don't want to jinx it.
We won't jinx
it's
it.
a little edgy. I'm a little edgy, but so we'll get there.
No, that's great. I think the first part where you started with that is probably the most important message out of that entire story, and that is about your personal brand, right? I think so many entrepreneurs, even executives that I work with, tend to identify themselves with the company they're working with instead of kind of figuring out who they were first, who they want to be as a leader, who do they want to be as an individual that's giving back to the world or giving back to the profession or giving back to whatever the story is that they're trying to build about themselves. They lose that in working for a particular organization. They lose that in working for a particular manager or supervisor. And I think understanding what that personal brand is and being true to themselves is far more important than who it is that you're doing it for.
Yeah, I really learned that when I was in energy weather, and it part of the nature of being in energy trading. There was a lot of movement, late 90s, early 2000s. There was a lot of movement between companies, and to say what company you're with was almost meaningless. I was one of the first 5 people in that sector, so. And having a last name, and it's been for jokes for decades. A last name like Studwell, I believe I'm the only Aaron Studwell in North America. It does tend to stick and be rememberable.
Okay.
And so you wind up going from place to place, but people know your name, know you. It could be everything from positive, it's great to see you, to I actually had this happen once. I was in a men's room at a conference, and somebody else is like, "Oh, I know who you are." "Oh, okay. Well, that's not a good thing."
Yeah.
I'm like, where did that come from? But it's something you have to manage as well. And it's not always positive. So I think there's an acceptance of that, and you just keep doing better every day.
Yeah, he must have given a bad forecast once, and he just didn't.
And that can happen when you have $1 million decisions on forecasts. A bad forecast or even I have had race forecasts that were right and still been, I'll use vilified by other groups.
That's crazy stuff. So how is the race weather? And we'll pop into some of the other stuff. But the race weather, I think when you and I first met, that fascinated me as much as anything. How much are decisions being based on your prediction of the weather or your idea of what might happen or what could happen?
The best story I have, and I just happened to be listening to the scanners one day. We had just updated, or I had just updated the website. This is before we had a staff saying, "Hey, look, the storms are like 4 miles out." This is before social media too, so everything's kind of on this rolling feed on the website. So everybody's hitting refresh. And I heard one of the crew chiefs say, "Hey, he just updated the website. Storms are 4 miles out. If we get a caution here, stay out." They stayed out based on our decision and came in second in the race based on our weather call. I know the media uses it. I've gotten very nice notes when I'm at the track, very well received by the media and teams. They know who I am. They do listen in. They do make decisions in race, and that's a lot of what we do is that what we call nowcasting, watching the radar, watching the wind shifts. We even get down to, hey, a cloud line is going to move over the area and track, so they know track temperatures may drop, so that'll affect the handling of the cars.
That's neat. That's neat stuff.
Yeah, so it's opened so many doors, and it was something I started in 2003, not ever thinking it would be anything big. Yeah. It was just because I was between jobs at the time. and people were asking me about a hurricane that was going to come into the Delaware area when they're racing at Dover. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to make a website. And then I talked to a guy who had a big media website at the time too. And I was like, hey, can you link to mine? And he did. And it's just driven it ever since. And then social media is really kind of changed the messaging, or changed, how it's messaged and how often, what the expectations are. And it's just, everything's real time now and so data driven that we've worked with teams about inputting both forecasts and real-time radar and satellite into their models for simulation, because they'll have AI guidance to say, hey, somebody took 2 tires on lap 178. We know tire degradation is this. We know their throttle trace is this. So how many tires do we want to take if we're going to have a caution in the next 5 to 10 laps?
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted to integrate everything like that, and they wanted to integrate our forecasting, our background and expertise.
Well, you're going to impact track temperature and then the life of the tire and how many laps they can go and all that kind of stuff by doing so.
Right. And then with NASCAR, it's a chance. It's generally they don't race in the rain, so it's when are you going to have a caution? Because we had a thunderstorm at a July race, and they called the race early because there was lightning 9 miles away. Well, somebody knew to stay out. Everybody else went in. So they stayed out and won the race based on knowing that there were more storms coming in and that the lightning was just going to continue for hours. At that point, you're just, okay, am I going to stay up front, or are they going to end the race early because of weather? And they did.
That's terrific. So race weather, what's the website before we move away from it?
Raceweather.net. And like I said, we just launched a brand new version and indexed with Google, and looking for advertisers. Shameless plug, but really proud of what we built. We've got a great team behind me, and that's one thing I've always focused on as a leader. And I'm going to go. I've learned more, and maybe as much from bad bosses as from good bosses.
Yes.
Excuse me. Where I had one of my employees or an analyst wrote a report, and I reviewed it, and I put out the report saying, okay, Cheryl wrote the report. If you have any questions, ask her, but I've reviewed it and I approve it. My boss comes to me, he's like, why did you give her credit? Because she wrote it. And I just could never understand that mindset.
Yeah. That
these people are working hard. And so I'm now thinking that if I put out a report, he's going to take credit for it. So, and we had a big, the big trade floors. I saw him poke his head around to see if I was still working, and he was going to hide from me and not say goodbye. And I'm always the guy who's like, hey, before I leave a shift and I have people like in a 24/7 environment, are you okay? Do you need anything? Is there anything we can do to take a little off your plate? Just to make sure that everybody's even and nobody's stressed. And we just try to manage the workload, and lead the people.
Yeah. So how many people do you have? I mean, where does the bulk of your resources sit right now? Are you putting a bunch of it into EXO as a whole? Are you putting it into EC Sports Management? Do you have some on Chesapeake? Where are all your people?
We have 2 meteorologists on race weather. Okay. And we have a marketing intern with Regent's College in London. He was introduced, another one just through networking. One of our business development people said, hey, he is a networking marketing company. He's mostly been in dental. Okay. But he's learning the sports management side. So we're giving him an opportunity. And that's something I really value. I just had a call earlier today with one of my mentees, is mentoring.
Yeah.
To share my experiences like this. And really, he and I have become friends. And it's, having been the hiring person, I know that professional experience is important. So it gives them the chance to say, hey, I forecasted in a high pressure environment. I did this web development. I did this project. So it gives them opportunities, and then their bosses or future bosses can call me and say, hey, look, we want to hire Chase. And luckily, Chase already has it. Just got a job. Yep. Hey, we want to hire Chase. What do you think? Oh, he's a hard worker. Here's what he's done for us. And it really not only mentors them, but it gives them opportunities to grow. And I want to see the people who come in and work for me. I want to see him grow. I want to see him grow and grow beyond even where I'm at.
Yep.
They're here as a stop. And if somebody wants to come in and say, hey, I want to be your director of sales and I want to stay with you till you sell or whatever happens next, that's great. But I also understand there are going to be some roles where it's, hey, they're going to come in for 2 years. They're going to learn. They're going to, get more arrows in their quiver. They're going to build their skill set and they're going to move on. And I want to see people really succeed. Knowing that I was part of their success is really kind of what brings me a lot of satisfaction from a business and a leader standpoint.
Well, and this is where that shit that your former boss was trying to push on you about not giving credit. That's where it's so important to lead the way you do, because if you weren't giving credit from these people, they can't go someplace else and say, I did that. Well, no, it's got Aaron Studwell's name on it.
Right.
The doctor did that. You didn't do that. Well, no, I did it. I wrote the bulk of that. So now they can go back and prove that they did it. That's good. Now, how did you evolve into that as a leader, given that, the poor leaders? Was there a specific individual along the path that kind of taught you to do that?
I really think it was a lot of my coaches. I think even from my high school coaches, my high school lacrosse and high school football coach, to seeing how somebody like Bo Schembechler led and Lloyd Carr led. One of my best stories with Bo was really the first time I had met him on the field. We'd shaken hands in the office, but I'm out during freshman two-a-days and I'm just out shagging punts. And he comes up, you're new here. Okay, there are 200 people around this program.
Yeah.
For him to recognize, hey, we got a new manager. He is paying attention to what's around him and who's around him. He comes up, pats me on the shoulder, and he calls somebody over to shag punts instead of me. He's like, oh, where are you from? What do you want to study? What do your parents do? And it really just kind of engaged that now he's not just interested in what I can do, but who I am. And that was really who he was, because he did that for so many players. There's so many players that have gone through that program with so much respect for Bo and for Lloyd. And I don't want to cut out Gary Moeller either. He was head coach there for a bit with them and the Lions. But it is really through the example and of seeing how they treated people. One of the best lessons I've got from Lloyd was, if I'm mad at you for something you did, I'm going to call you out to my office, or I'm going to pull you aside. If I'm trying to make it a teaching moment for everybody, don't worry about it. If you're running a drill at 75% and I want you running at 100%, you're going to know it, because now I'm going to say everybody's at 100%. Or if I'm running at 100 and they're running at 75, somebody's going to get hurt.
Yep.
So it was really seeing how they interacted with people and really treated people. And then it comes down to is, how do I want to be treated? And it turns around, it's like, hey, look, I'm the kind of person that needs a pat on the back occasionally, and say, okay, so this is to get the recognition. And that's another lesson I want to go down a little rabbit hole here is just one of the key lessons I learned a little bit later was having a very large staff and learning how I have to lead everybody almost individually, that it's really not a one size fit all. And I had a problem employee for a little bit. But once I found what she wanted to do, she couldn't tell me what she wanted to do besides the core job.
Sure.
That she wanted to be challenged some other way. And I saw that with a lot of our young talent. They wanted to do the core job, but then they wanted to learn. They wanted to code or write or do something that really kind of built out their skill sets and showcased them. And that's great. If somebody wants that, I've had it where I've got these steady eddies that are the foundation of the company. They come in and they mentor and they lead, but they don't lead. They're quiet leaders. And so I is learning how to lead him and lead her in two very separate, distinct ways. And it's not based on demographics. It's not based on education. It's based on personality. And it's really building that one-on-one. And it's hard with it's a large staff, but I always tell when I had an office and I had a door, it was always an open door policy. Is, hey, if it's open, you can come in. If you need to shut it behind you and talk, shut it behind you.
Yeah, I think it's an important lesson for everyone, especially early leaders, especially young entrepreneurs or first-time entrepreneurs to try to figure out, because, and I said this, I guested on somebody else's podcast, gosh, probably 6-8 months ago. And one of the questions was, what was the most important leadership lesson you learned along the way? And it was essentially that. It was that one size fits all doesn't work from a leadership standpoint. Not everybody's going to respond to the same type of leadership style. And as a result, sometimes as a leader, you have to be a bit more of a chameleon, plug from my chameleon leadership book. You have to be a little more of a chameleon and be able to adapt your approach, not your values, not the core of who you are, just adapt your approach to the individual and be able to lead them in a different way. Some people need a lot more hands-on, some people need a little more hands-off.
And some people may see that as a weakness, or acquiesce may not be quite the right word, or acquiescing to them, but I think it's just being respectful.
Yeah, I think it's meeting them where they are. Right.
Was that?
It's more about meeting them where they are.
That's a great way to say it. Yeah.
I think if you try to force it on them, you're going to lose, and you'll lose good employees that way. Right.
Yeah.
I always tell my clients to say, when something's starting to go bad, you've got to be open about your communications. You got to be open about your approach, because it's not the dumb mice that jump ship first. Right. It's usually the smarter ones are the first ones that leave. And so things aren't going to get any better by waiting. And so having that conversation, being able to adjust and adjust your style to some of your best employees where necessary. Doesn't mean you let them be right all the time. That's not part of adjusting your leadership. It's just adjusting your approach to meet them.
It's the messaging, right?
Yes.
It's understanding what they need and how they want to be challenged. And sometimes the people who are going to come in and work their shift and not work anything else, there's still ways to challenge them that they want to. They're generally, from what I've seen, they're the ones who want to share their knowledge. They don't want to be the guy who's doing reviews and doing paperwork. They want to be the guy who will sit down and say, okay, here's what you want to look for in this situation, and really teach the science and teach the technology. And I'm still friends with him today, and had a project last year. If it went through, I would have brought him in to be a lead scientist on it. So we're, like I said, all over the place, but really maintaining those connections and maintaining that respect over the years is something very important to me as well.
Gotcha. So I find it interesting, we've talked about the management of the staff and some of that in regard to your organizations. But the beautiful part about sports agency and stuff is kind of the talent. Talk to me about dealing with what could be some egos and that kind of stuff from the drivers and the talent side, because that's not the same type of leadership and management style.
Yeah, one thing I learned early on in this game, and this is even pre-sports, it was your client needs to think they're your only client. That they don't want to hear about anybody else. They want to hear about what you're doing for them. They don't want to. What's hard is they want to see about anybody else. That's hard in the land of social media. But it's every call, everything is, what are you doing for me? What are we going to have for this? The hardest ones I've had have been the ones at the highest level, because they have climbed that ladder.
Yep.
I've never yet encountered anybody who I felt they were entitled. They understand that we're here working for them, that's the relationship we have. I mean, we eventually get to, if they're a client long enough, that we're friends, that we can call and just, the Christmas card list, or, hey, how are things going outside of the sales side?
Yep.
Some of the biggest challenges I've had have been parents with the young drivers, that the parents, I hate to say, get in the way, but I don't have an open channel. Even if they're adults, I don't have an open channel of communication with the driver. So it's like this layer of management that's filtering the message, and I may not necessarily always know what's going on, and I don't have an updated schedule. So it's getting that information, and you have to find the best fit. Then you're looking at demographics. Who does the company want representing the brand? And it's like, well, why did he get the sponsorship and not me? Well, the client wanted, not you. Yep. And that's happened. So it's Generally, they're down to earth kids because I say kids. They're all my son's age, all except for one's my son's age or younger. Where they've really worked hard to come up the ladder. Nobody's had it. Nobody's had a silver spoon. I've seen drivers where their parents have gone through divorce, have had their struggles, and you're become a friend. You're not just a business associate then who's handling their sponsorships. They're like, you want to make sure you don't intrude, but it's like, hey, look, if you need to talk, one of the first things they'll have is my direct number. They can call, pick up, text, say, look, I need somebody to talk to.
Yep.
And it's building that relationship as well. Luckily, no egos. I have dealt with drivers who do have them, but they're not my clients. So just kind of like, okay. But then you run into a lot of drivers who are down to earth and they know the journey you're on because they've been on it themselves and they're just trying to climb the ladder like everybody else.
Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah, there's an interesting correlation there because the driver has to understand that the sponsorship, all of that is for them, but it's really not. It's for the person driving the car, right? There's that, and I'm sure you've seen the story in the clip. It's an old attorney, and I'm going to butcher this badly. We'll get the link in the show notes. But it's an old attorney general or secretary of state or something who's speaking to a conference. And he said, last year I spoke at this same conference, and last year I was still in that position. And they brought me a car, met me at the airport, rolled out the red carpet, brought me a car, took me to my hotel, waited for me, brought me down. And I stood up here, they gave me a cup of coffee in a ceramic cup, etc. He said, here I am today. I no longer have the title. I flew coach. I took a taxi to my hotel, took a taxi here today. And, I've got a cup. It's a styrofoam cup with coffee. He said, it occurs to me that all of those things weren't for me. They were for the position.
Right. And
while I'm filling that position, they're for me. And when I'm out of that position, they aren't. And I think that's an interesting lesson for your drivers in that, it's about you, but it's not about you. It's about the position you're filling. Right. And so the sponsorship, the promotion, all of this kind of stuff is all for that driver role.
It's for the driver role and it's for the company that's coming in. And so in that analogy, it's for the conference. Yep. It's if the company's coming in, and I had somebody sponsor because they wanted they sponsored a car at a race because they wanted to get their grandfather down on pit road to meet Jeff Gordon. I was there.
Wow.
And it was it was hard to make happen, but I had to make it happen. And I just happened to see him on the track pre-race talking to NASCAR's director of marketing, who I also know. They were over there. I walk up. They know who I am. I've worked with Jeff and his team before.
Okay.
And I said, hey, Jeff, I've got a sponsor. His grandfather would really like to meet you. Shake your hand, get a picture. Can we do that soon? Yeah, let's do it right now. So I wave him over. That's the only reason they sponsored. They wanted that access. They wanted to be down there. And it's really cool to see your name or your company's name on the car.
Right.
But we've also done casinos where it's like, it's more about let's do something nice for our high rollers. It's get them suites. Let's get them special access at the track. Let's take their wives on a spa day and we'll have a golf outing. And it winds up being this big thing. And okay, yeah, we get the name on the car, but the ROI is more on keeping your high rollers happy. And I've seen it for VIPs of companies where you want to treat your C-level people and maybe some of your high performers to something special. And you take them to a track and you have them in pit road and you have them have lunch with the driver and the team. And it's all this energy. And it's really something about that. Sometimes it's about, hey, let's put our vodka on track and we'll put the brand out there and also it's developing into a B2B space. And that's something we could talk about too, how the B2B side of this is all evolved.
Why is that? What's causing the evolution?
I think it's hard to write a big check. When I had a call yesterday with a team owner of an IndyCar team, and he says it's going to cost him $10 million to run the team this year. NASCAR high level, so cup level, high performing team, it had been close to 25 million. I think they've kind of cut costs, and we'll call it close between 18 and 20. And it's just a lot of money. So it's hard to ask somebody to write that big check. But we've built B2B relationships with both charities and cybersecurity companies, packaging companies. I've got to make a call about a lubricant company where if somebody comes in and says, hey, say they're a foods company and they buy a lot of cardboard. We can sell them cardboard at a 15% less rate. So let's take a chunkier savings. We'll put that as advertising on track. So now you're saving some money, but now you're getting advertising with us as a brand. You get all the activation bonuses. Plus, we've reduced the cost of your packaging material. Grocery stores, we can get them end caps. You want to sell with us, and we'll take because the end caps are going to sell more. We're going to take a portion of your increased sales, and we're going to put it towards sponsoring this car, but you still keep a percentage of your revenue increase.
Yep.
Cybersecurity the same way. We're working with a couple charities to say a company wants to make a donation to a 501c3 that we have an arrangement with. They'll make I'll call it $100,000 donation. A portion goes to running the charity. A portion goes to the outreach portion of the 501c3. So the company advertising or the company donating gets the tax write-off. They also get their name on the car along with the charity name.
Yep.
So they would be I'll call it a co-primary sponsor. So we're going to have the logo of the charity on the hood, and then on the quarter panels, we would have the donation provided by. Then they would get all the perks of being a donating company.
Yeah.
Conferences, special access, the 501c3. So it's not just this one-dimensional transactional thing. It's now this big, you get a tax benefit, you get the marketing, you get all the benefits of supporting a charity. Plus you're supporting a charity, so you can actually do marketing off of that. We're now partnered with X to do this. And I have one of my drivers. He's been great about doing that himself. He's working with a charity focused on neurodiverse individuals. And another one is Drive for Humanity, which is a smaller charity. But he went out and got that deal himself and said, hey, look, you donate. It's more for local when he races at a local track, where if somebody donates $5,000, a portion of it will go to his racing and a portion will go for Drive for Humanity in that region.
Okay. I think it's brilliant. I think the brilliancy in that is that the individual who is saving the money on those costs, for instance, typically when we have that happen, or not individual, but the company that's saving those costs, typically when that happens, those costs get lost, right? We save 10%, but they get eaten up by something else in the organization. Now we're truly saving that money, but now we are reallocating that immediately towards marketing before it can get eaten by something else, before it can go elsewhere or to charity or wherever.
So it's really becomes a situation where you can see, if you're the sponsor or you're the partner company, you can see, like you said, you can see where that's going, and you could not only say, hey, we reduced costs here, but by doing this deal, we've actually increased our advertising budget, our advertising reach.
Yep.
And you're helping the team. One thing about racing, and it's pretty much universal, at least for North American sports, is if you're a race fan, 70% of the time you will support a brand in racing, not even your favorite driver's brand. But if you see a brand, you are 70% more likely to support that brand.
Yep.
And I've seen that number for decades. We ran our own internal polling a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago. And it was like 71, 72%. And it's across NASCAR, IndyCar, IMSA, so sports car racing, drag racing.
Well, you figure, and with high definition televisions and all that kind of stuff, anybody who's watching racing, A 200 lap race, for instance, that car is going to come by you. You even on TV, you're going to see that car at least 40 or 50 times.
Right.
And whatever branding is on there, you're going to pick up the. I almost threw a couple out, but I won't.
I almost did the exact same thing.
That company, we'll throw it out. Now, if anybody wants to sponsor this podcast, I'll gladly throw that out. But you're going to see that sponsor flash in front of you 40 or 50 times, right? And we as humans, we need to see things multiple times. Even 3 to 5 times is enough. Just seeing us to kind of encourage that. Oh, that's right. I've been meaning to get on that website to order that product, and there it is.
I have a Michigan teammate. I'm not sure if he's still with the company, but it's a media tracking company where it'll watch the race in real time, and it'll be able to recognize when that brand's on, and then they'll have cookies in their website and notice spikes in their web traffic.
Yep, tied to when it flashed by.
Yeah, and people, I've done that. I see a sponsor. I have no idea what that company is. Well, look it up during the race.
It's terrific because it can directly correlate to an increase in traffic, which every company should know the correlation between the increase in traffic and revenue. How much more traffic do I need to get another client or another customer, et cetera? That's great stuff.
Funny to go back, we just was saying we launched a website today. That's the first thing I did after it was launched. Make sure the new site is indexed.
Yep.
Every single page is indexed. And if there's any problems, go back and fix it. Because that's how we measure our traffic, how we measure our revenue.
No, that's terrific. I like it. So we've talked quite a bit on the good stuff. Now we're going to switch gears on you.
Yeah.
Give me a couple of those lessons. Give me one of your top lessons lately that you've run into that any entrepreneur probably should know along their way.
The first one, and we've talked about this a few times, know who you're doing business with. I will leave it very generic. We're in the middle of some fraud that we experienced last year. Law enforcement is involved. We trusted the wrong people. We gave them access to financial data, business plans, and we did, and then we got just kind of left out holding the bag. And it really comes down to, we thought we had done a deep dive. We had looked, they had business licenses in the states they were doing business in. They actually had business relations with the state government. Something changed. And we trusted the wrong people. We're still kind of digging ourselves out of that hole. Don't spend, lesson number 2, tied to lesson number 1. Yeah. Do not spend money you don't have yet. We had received a receipt thinking we were going to receive the financing we had thought we arranged. So I went out, bought software, bought licenses, hired people. We increased staff. Now I'm on the hook for back wages. We're working with those individuals as well. Don't spend my boy. If I could redo 2024, oh my gosh. Don't get, lesson number 3, don't get lured in by what you think is going to be something you think you can handle. In 2023, we were approached by a Ukrainian soccer player about representing them and as their FIFA agent. Now, when we correct that, it was 2022. We sat down as an organization and said, this is something we can do. We had people on staff with soccer and soccer scouting experience, and we thought we had enough connections. We just closed that part of the business. We had lost the people we had to do the work. It's not something I could do myself. We grew too fast and something we didn't know enough about. I think we thought we were chasing the next shiny thing. We overestimated our capabilities. We strayed from our core mission. I know racing. I know weather. That's why we have race weather. And I didn't have the connections I needed to do that business. I hired people to help with that business when I thought I had the money to pay them, and I didn't. So it all gets tangled up. Those are really the 3 key things that I've walked away the last couple of years with. And right now it's trying to hit the reset button. And 2 little quips that I've had to remember today and I just sit down and look at my list, being down to really back to a one-person company with some help, and they're great people, but I know there's a lot of, I've got to sign contracts and send NDAs, and I've got to do sales and all this. It's when everything is important, nothing is important. I have a list of 120 things that need to be done.
Yep.
And that's not an exaggeration. How do I prioritize? I can't just start at the top of the list and say that's as important as what's down here. So it's categorizing. And I have not a mentor, but somebody I really listen to a lot.
Mm-hmm.
She says, focus your day on what she calls IPAs, income producing activities, and then save your nights for India Pale Ales.
Yeah.
That you start the day out, and we talked about this, I believe, last week with emails, and how do you approach your budgeting of your time during the day. And that seems to be a moving target some days. The other thing I've remembered today is how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You've got this huge project sitting in front of you. How do I start? Okay, I want to start with this task. At this point, this is the most important thing I need to do right now. Do it. Don't get distracted. Stay on focus. Stay on point. I am a list guy, and you've known that from day one.
Yep.
About me.
No, I love those. I mean, to summarize, I mean, and I can't summarize any better than the last two statements you had. So I hope we pop those out as little nuggets and quips to throw out on social for you. But the lesson, know who you're doing business with. Don't spend money you don't have. And the last one I'd kind of summarize as the difference between core and context, right? Don't lose track of your core, right? Jeffrey Moore had the book Living on a Fault Line back in, I think, 99, 2000, something like that. He came out with it. And it does a lot of discussion of this difference between core and context. And the only reason it resonates with me is because shortly thereafter, I was working with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, who had just bought a smaller pharmaceutical company and had brought them in. And they'd done a couple of those M&A activities. And so they were a large pharmaceutical company with a lot of this other stuff. And you went into the company store and you saw chewing gum, you saw razor blades, you saw mouthwash, you saw chocolate eggs. I mean, all of this was kind of under the same umbrella. And at the same time, that pharmaceutical company had products that were coming off a patent, right? One of them was coming off a patent. There was another one that was a couple years away that was coming off. And those were their two major sellers. And you looked at the pipeline wasn't too healthy. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that management said, at least I like to believe that one of the things the management said to themselves is, we're getting too far away from our core. Mm-hmm. Right? We need to get back to our core. We're getting lost in all this context stuff. Let's get back to who we are and what we do well. And they did. Pretty soon you saw that stuff going out of the company store because they were selling off this and they were selling off that. And they got back to the company that they should have been to begin with. And they're, a much better company today because of it. Right. And I think anybody, even as an entrepreneur, needs to understand the difference between what do I do well and what's the spaghetti I'm just throwing against the wall to see what's going to stick.
Right. And that's what it was. Is like, hey, this is because at that point, and it still is, soccer, global football is a growing sport. We just didn't have the right tool set at that point. And we hired younger staff who maybe, I don't want to say they overstated, but I think we were bigger. We were too big for our britches. We just thought we could do things we couldn't. And, we worked and we did our best for our clients. But sometimes you realize, hey, we got to shut that light out.
Yep. Well, and, I think there's an intent there. The big word I like to use with clients quite a bit is intent. And that is, are you setting out to be a agent in that world football or soccer arena and have them? Is that who you want to be? Do you want to be an agent in any number of sports, or do you want to be the best one you can be in this area? Do you want to be the best representative here? Do you want to go with the sponsors that you know in the space that you know because you've got a history there and network and relationships and everything else? I think too often entrepreneurs will allow themselves to be in the land grab mode of any, take all comers, anybody that wants to come and help. and they don't
Because
get
we need
intentional.
revenue and we can do it this
Yep.
way. Yep. You just
Yeah, who do
want
I
to spend.
want to work with? Is why when we're working together with people, my big key is don't worry about what you do well. Figure out who you want to work with. What are the customers? What are the clients that you want to work with? Then ask yourself what their needs are, and then adapt what you do well to their needs, not the other way around. Right.
Right. And that's how we came into 2025, and we had a call last week with a potential sponsor who wanted to be in a series.
Mm.
We didn't have contacts in that series. We don't have a client, I should say. We do have contacts. And it's given us a growth opportunity that's really complementary to where we are in North American motorsports.
Yep.
It really rounds out, because what we're positioning ourselves as a company, rather than we represent 17 drivers, we work in 5 or 6 different series.
Yeah.
And each one has an individual demographic. And it's understanding what our customers need, or our clients or our sponsors, or however you want to phrase that. Where do they want to be? And now we give them an opportunity versus somebody who works for a race team and they're just in NASCAR. Boom.
Yeah.
Okay, I can put you in this box. Well, my customers aren't in your box. They're in over there. Well, why we can't help you with that? Here's Bill over, or Sally over at XYZ Motorsports. They can do that. But now you say, okay, hey, let's talk to Studwell. He's got people in 6 different series, and they're all different demographics, and they're all different regions of the country. That's where we should have grown as a company, and not lost what is going to look back and say maybe a loss. There's going to be a ton of lessons learned from 2024.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the best things I can probably say I walk away from that with. How not to do some things. But 2025 is going to be some growth opportunities, I believe, and we're going to continue to work towards that. It's for the entrepreneur. I tell you, there are days and this is oversharing, I will just lay down and let the tears go. It's not even crying. It's just releasing.
Well, there's
no shame in that. For me, there's no shame in that. It's understanding, but don't get defeated. Don't beat yourself up. You had a vision. This is a journey, and there's no easy solutions. And I can't imagine myself doing anything else right now besides running this company.
No, and that's where that tells you are where you should be, right? And I think the interesting part about the entrepreneur in those situations is you have to have a purpose that's bigger than what you're doing right now. Right? You have to be out here for some reason, and if it's not just because, well, I couldn't find anything else that I want to do with my life. No, you're out here because you're trying to build something. And when the tears come, when the frustration comes, when you put your fist through the wall, when you're elated and drinking champagne, all of those moments are part of the journey. And it's just a part of this entrepreneurial journey that we have all signed up for. And the only alternative is go out here and find a job on a website and apply for it and go work for somebody else.
Yep. As my friends call it, go find yourself a W-2 job.
Yeah, exactly.
The person I mentioned earlier, it's like with the IPAs, and she goes, you work, you get paid. You work, you get paid. Mm-hmm. That's what that routine is. And here as an entrepreneur, it's you work. Maybe you get paid.
Yeah. But you learn to enjoy the work. Right. And as much as getting paid.
And the people. And what did I write in a presentation once? I was a servant leader before I even knew that term existed. I had to go back and look. The term was coined in, I believe, the early 70s.
Sure.
But that's how I've always wanted to operate is I'm leading, but I'm kind of the guy out front, and I'm also trying to enable, because the sole purpose is my job is to get our clients on track, allow them to race, allow them the opportunity to succeed. I can't get behind the wheel. I'm not the guy who turns the wrenches, but I'm the guy who is going to have our men and women clients, drivers on track and succeeding. And racing is all about the money. If you have more money, you're likely going to have a faster car.
Yeah.
And it's allowing them to chance to succeed.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. If there's anybody who hasn't been in the pit, I did some NHRA races with a former colleague and vendor that I worked with back in Tampa. His company sponsored an NHRA car, and so I got to go to the NHRA races. Got to go down in the pits and stuff. If you haven't been like within 5 feet of the engine changeover during an NHRA race, it's incredible, right? Like it's almost, you almost need symphony music running in the background while these guys go in and out, because they are so fluid in their motions, reaching over top of each other. They all have a specific job. They all have a specific purpose, and it's just an amazing thing to watch.
It's a choreographed dance.
It is very much so.
Amazing. Yeah, and I have people like, why into racing? I remember the first time I was really around a race car. I was working at the GM Proving Grounds, and I was in my office. We were in a trailer off the garage, and I'm sitting there typing up a report, just looking at the data and processing the data. And all of a sudden, I hear this engine just fire, and it just takes up the whole building. I'm like, what in the world?
Wow.
I go out, and it's Sterling Marlin. So this is late, probably early 90s. Number 94 Sunoco Pontiac up on a rack. And I'm like, ooh. And they're just up and they're like testing the engines, and they were doing brake work on it and brake testing. And I'm like, can I drive? I was a mechanical engineer, hydraulic engineer for them. And they're like, I'm like, can I drive it? And they're like, no, just to test engineers. I'm like, dang it. That was when I got hooked on racing, right that instant.
Yeah, and so that's just looking at the way you light up when you talk about that kind of stuff. Yeah. That's when you know you're in the right spot, right? Mm-hmm. You know, you can get excited about finding sponsors or being an agent for international football players and that kind of stuff. But that's not it, right? You're not going to get that kind of glow from going and watching a soccer game. You get that by going down in the pits and watching the cars come in.
It's the smell, the noise. Yeah, it's really is everything.
That's beautiful. So before we wrap up, anything else you want to tack on to here? Any other lessons? Anything else pop in mind that you want to share with the audience?
Just have faith in yourself. Have faith in your journey. Document. And I wish I would have taken better notes at the start. We can talk about what I was at a briefing once. Key lessons learned. We don't learn lessons very well. And I think we need to understand our own path, our own journey, to know where you're going.
Yeah.
One thing I love to do is I read every day. I'll read a business book, consulting book. We talked about 12-week years last week. Yep. I'm actually reading Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett right now. So fiction. I'll switch off between the two. But being somebody who finished their PhD when they were 53 years old, I started late. But it's always about learning, and there's always something to learn, and look for the next challenge. I've got lists of ideas outside of sports of stuff I want to read about, learn about, because you can always take those lessons and apply them to your life. And so for me, I've always just valued learning. And that really came from both my parents and the teachers I had growing up, the professors I had at Michigan. And also, both my PhD advisors were younger than me at University of Houston.
Oh, that's funny. As you said, you started a little late.
Yeah, I started my master's when I was 93. I was 26. So I'd actually worked for 4 years between finishing my undergraduate and going back to Texas A&M.
I think there's value in that. A lot of these individuals will go straight out of college straight out of their undergrad into their master's. And that's fine if it's convenient for doing so and if you need the momentum and that kind of stuff. But I think there's just something to be said about grabbing a couple of years of experience before you go back. I mean, I had a couple of years before I did mine as well. And you just see things differently. Right. Even your thoughts on the academic world are different than that they were when you were in college.
And then it's also, for me, it was going back in my 40s, and I was older than one of my professors, but it was a forecasting class, so I had to take it. It's just part of the core curriculum, but I'm sitting up in the back, and I'm just kind of being quiet, taking notes, because it's still always things to learn. The professor stopped class. Aaron, how do you use this in your job every day? Because I was leading a forecast group, and I was a little surprised, a little caught off guard the first time he said that. But then I go, this is how we use it. And so he even saw where he's in pure academia that there's somebody else as an asset, as a resource. And maybe the lesson of that is there are always resources around us. We just don't see it, or sometimes we don't want to see it.
Yep. I agree. I love that. And I think it's a great place to stop. So, Aaron, I want to thank you for your time. We appreciate you sharing your insights today.
Russ, thank you for having me. Appreciate you and your friendship and what your company does. And look forward to building our relationship. I actually have a couple project ideas for us.
That would be great. I appreciate it. So that's a wrap for this episode of Legacy Unscripted. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't just sit on it. Take action today to build your future. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who may need to hear it. If you've got a story to share or you want to connect, you know where to find me. But until next time, keep it real, keep it bold, and keep living your legacy.